Loving Sairam and greetings from Prashanthi Nilayam. It's been a long time since I did a regular Musings talk. There have been many reasons for this. Some of you have wondered why. There is no time to go into all those reasons, but let me just say I've been quite busy and I hope to resume my regular broadcasts shortly. Meanwhile, I am doing this broadcast for a very special reason. You know, the DASARA festival just went by. There is plenty of folklore and there are many stories about the meaning of DASARA, about the significance of DASARA and so on. I shall skip all that. There is a reason why I am making a reference to DASARA, and that has a bit of important history that all of us must know. Specifically, I wish to recall today the DASARA of 1997. That year, DASARA fell on the 11th of October, and something very important happened that afternoon. What was that? That is what I am going to tell you now. As I just told you, October 11th was DASARA day. Back then, the routine on DASARA day used to be as follows. In the morning, we would all assemble in the Purnachandra hall for the conclusion of the Yagyam, the grand conclusion, I should say, when the Purna Ahuti would be performed in Swami's divine presence. Oh, it was wonderful, glorious. I hope you would be able to see videos of that sometime or the other. After the Purna Ahuti, what would happen is that the priests would all go out in a procession. Sometimes in those days the procession used to be led by Sai Gita. They would go to the river to bring some water from the river. That would take almost an hour, and during that time, Swami would give a divine discourse. And by the time the discourse ended, the priests would also be marching in. I don't know how they timed it, but it happened that way almost always. And once the priests came, they would offer the river water ceremoniously to Swami. He would bless it, and then started the exciting procedure of sprinkling holy water on all the devotees. The water would be poured out from the pot into a silver bowl, big bowl, and Swami would go around sprinkling it with a big sprinkler, and he would go up and down the hall, and people would lean forward, crane their necks, waiting for some holy water to fall, drops of it to fall on them. Some people got really drenched and they were so happy. Of course, Swami also got drenched, and the interesting thing was, the more he sprinkled, the more happy he would become, and he would go up and down the hall making sure not even an ant or a mosquito is left. And that would not be all. He would go outside the hall, because there would be many people waiting on both sides of the hall, and he would shower his blessings and grace by sprinkling holy water on all of them. By the time it all ended, it would be almost 1 o'clock. And after that, you would normally think it would be a relaxed afternoon. Often it is, but on this particular DASARA day, there was a hectic schedule in the afternoon also. It started around 3 p.m. And what was that function about? That's what this talk is all about. Well, let me do a bit of a flashback, taking you back from 1997 to 1994, when it all started. On 22nd November of that year, that is to say 1994, there was a function in Purnachandra Hall in the afternoon. That function was for the purpose of honoring Dr. Venugopal. Who is this Venugopal? He is the surgeon who performed the first heart operation the day the hospital was inaugurated. 3 years had passed. Dr. Venugopal had done yeoman service to Swami's hospital, and Bhagwan wanted to bless him and publicly honor him. That is why this function was arranged in the Purnachandra Hall. The then Prime Minister of India, Mr. P.V. Narasimha Rao, who by the way was the person who inaugurated the hospital 3 years earlier, he was invited to be present on this occasion as the chief guest. Now Dr. Venugopal was duly honored, and after that the Prime Minister gave a speech. That was of course normal. And finally came Swami's discourse. That also was normal. He of course spoke about the hospital, about Dr. Venugopal's contributions and all that. But then suddenly he injected a new note. Turning to the Prime Minister, Swami said, "This area is an arid region." An arid region means a place which is almost like a desert. It gets very little rainfall. And Swami said, this place, this region, Rayalaseema, has been suffering without proper drinking water facilities for a long, long time. Nobody has done anything about it. It's time that somebody did something. And then Swami said very significantly, if the government comes forward to start a project, we in the Satya Sai Central Trust would not be far behind, and we are ready to extend any help that the government may want. Now that was the direct appeal to the Prime Minister. After that the function was over, the Prime Minister left, and now the question is, what happened? Well, in Delhi nothing happened. Very little happens there anyway. And over here, Swami was waiting for a response. It was January, after November, December was over, January was over, February was over, and March was about to start. Not a word from Delhi. Swami became impatient. This was 1995, by the way. So what did he do? He called the members of the Central Trust and gave them orders. I would like to call it marching orders because it was given in March. And what did Swami say? He told them very simply, give safe drinking water to as many people as possible in as many villages of Anantapur district as possible, and in such a manner that they get water throughout the year. That's very important, throughout the year. So there are 2 points here. Safe drinking water, and it must be available throughout the year to as many people as possible in Anantapur district. And then he added, do it as quickly as possible and do not worry about the cost. The job must be done, that's all. Those were the orders. Now the members of the Central Trust were definitely stunned, at least to a certain extent, because there were cash flow issues, but then Swami's orders are orders. So promptly the machinery swung into action. And the first person who was sent for was Mr. Kondal Rao. Now who is Mr. Kondal Rao? I shall tell you, but I am sure many of you have seen him because he comes here very often. At that time, Mr. Kondal Rao was a chief engineer, and I think he was in charge of irrigation and waterworks. He was in the service of the Andhra government. And Swami also sent for Mr. A. Ramakrishna, who at that time worked for L&T, which by the way had just then completed the construction of the Sai Kulwant Hall, at least parts of it. So these two people were called, and they were told that a water project, drinking water project, had to be done for the Anantapur district, and it had to start almost immediately. Go ahead, look around, and give me a plan. That was Swami's order. Now, Kondal Rao and Mr. Ramakrishna, Mr. Kondal Rao and Mr. Ramakrishna, then went and met the state government. After all, you have to take their permission. It is their land. And started scouting around for sources of water around which they could build their water project. Now here you must pay careful attention. Swami had said safe drinking water. What's the meaning of that word? You see, normally till that time, people were drawing water from the ground. That is to say, they were drawing groundwater for purposes of drinking. Well, that's what people do in most places. But here in Anantapur district, there was a problem with groundwater. And that problem was the presence of excessive fluorine. Now, if you know your chemistry, then you would know that fluorine is a chemical element rather like chlorine. Chlorine is often used to purify water, and fluorine is also needed in water to a small extent, but excessive fluorine can be very, very troublesome. How? Firstly, it produces what is called dental fluorosis. The teeth get deformed, they become black, all sorts of problems. But more dangerous and troublesome is what is called skeletal fluorosis. Skeletal fluorosis means the bones get horribly deformed. It's really frightening to see those people. And all their life they walk around with completely bent bones. Walking is a torture. Some people can't even walk. They have to drag themselves. And thirdly, rheumatic arthritis. All these problems are widely prevalent, and Swami was aware of that. So that is why he insisted on safe drinking water, which in simple words means water without fluorine. So Mr. Ramakrishna and Mr. Kondal Rao went around all over the district and tried to locate places where they could get water with very little fluorine. What do you mean by water with very little fluorine? Well, rainwater doesn't come, it comes from above, it doesn't come from below, therefore it doesn't have any fluorine. So what they did was they went around looking for places where they could draw rainwater. Now you may say rainwater is available only when there is rain. True. But then rainwater flows through rivers, and river waters can be dammed, and from the dams there are canals and so on and so forth. And even if there is no rain, there is subsoil water in the river beds. So they went around looking for irrigation dams, irrigation canals, and river beds where there was good subsoil water. And it is around these places that they planned all their drinking water projects. Head source. In brief, they adopted 3 strategies. Strategy number 1 was to draw water from an irrigation canal, and this you can do only during the season when there is water in the canal. They release water for irrigation in the canal periodically, not always. And when they do, you draw water from that canal, and what do you do with that water? You pump it into a huge storage tank. And from there you draw water whenever you need, filter it and distribute it. So in scheme 1, water was drawn from an irrigation canal, stored in a summer storage tank as it was called, and then distributed to the villages. Scheme 2, there was one small dam across a riverbed and a canal system that was called PABR. It stands for Penna Ahobilam Balancing Reservoir. That's the name. And they decided that since some water is stored there, water could be drawn from there, purified and distributed. So this was scheme 2. Scheme 3 was to draw water from the bed of a river. You know this Chitravati river that flows past Puttaparthi? We all think that it disappears somewhere into the Bukkapatnam tank. No, actually it goes all the way to Kadapa and joins Penna river. If you see a map, you can find it. I didn't know that. I thought it ended in Bukkapatnam. It does not. And somewhere in that Chitravati river at the border of Kadapa district, Mr. Ramakrishna and Kondal Rao decided to sink infiltration wells because there was a good supply of subsoil water, fluorine free. So there were these 3 schemes, and based on this they decided to execute the water project. The basic idea is draw water from these places and distribute it to as many villages as possible. But there was another problem, and that problem was that the elevation in Anantapur district is not flat. There are lots of hills and valleys, and the north, which is where the water is, happens to be at a slightly lower level than the south, which is at a much higher level. And it's therefore, if you want to bring water from the north to the south, it means you have to pump against gravity. And that was a bit of a problem. It costs energy, it means more work, it means pumping stations, all sorts of things. Nevertheless, it had to be done. Those were Swami's orders, and they decided to do it. So they prepared a plan, submitted to Swami, and waited for his approval. Now, you might not have understood all that I said, but you don't worry. The details are quite interesting, and when this talk is published in our website as a transcript, all those graphics would be presented, and you can really understand what I am saying now.